Well, let's take you back to Cape Town now, where our reporter Nompumelelo Siziba is standing by with an update on expectations for the medium-term budget policy statement. Nompumelelo, good morning to you once again. I imagine the numbers really starting to gather outside the City Hall at this point.
Thanks very much, Naledi. Well, from my vantage point, I can't see much. But my colleague Abra Brabia did indicate that a number of organizations have threatened to come out and protest in the general area of the City Hall to protest, in terms of a number of issues. Of course, when you have a budget, you can never really satisfy everyone. There are always those groups who feel that there isn't enough funding for their causes and that sort of thing. So we haven't seen that much activity. It is probably a little bit too early because at the moment we haven't had much in the way of politicians getting into the City Hall. I think nearer the time when we get those policymakers coming into the general area, that's when we'll see more people coming through. But of course, as you say, we are eagerly anticipating the medium-term budget. And of course, the big story right now, the big theme right now is the fact that the Treasury is not managing to get enough revenue in relative to the rate at which government spending is taking place. And then there's been a push by National Treasury to government departments to taper down or slow down on spending because there just aren't the resources there. And when they do, of course, go out and spend, it means government is having to borrow more money, and there's a big question mark around that sustainability. One of the important stories that has come through in recent times is the fact that SARS has managed to collect money through its measures to get hold of people who are non-compliant taxpayers. It's really pushed in that regard and managed to grow revenue substantially in that way, which has been positive. To discuss this and other matters, I'm joined by David Warneke. He's the head of tax technical at BDO South Africa. David, thank you very much for speaking to us.
Morning.
So we know that SARS has been quite successful in getting non-compliant taxpayers to come to the tax-paying party. How much wiggle room do you think they have in that regard?
Well, I think it's difficult to know exactly what the so-called tax gap is, which is the gap between what they are collecting, what they should be collecting. There are various estimates of that, but there's no question that it's still very big, even given that they are doing a good job in trying to close that somewhat. I mean, there are some estimates that it's even as much as 300 billion rand. So if they could close that even by 10-20%, it makes a massive difference, for example, with regard to the shortfall that we're probably going to see announced this afternoon.
And just in terms of the way they pursue that, where are they managing to close those leakages?
Well, I think a lot of it's got to do with transfer pricing, which is the prices that are charged for goods and services that that South Africa makes, and amounts leaving the country as well as amounts coming into the country. So that unit could be beefed up. It's one of the areas that I think government would be well advised to actually spend money on. I know they're looking at cutting budgets quite substantially, but I think that's one of the areas where an investment could actually reap quite big rewards.
So it's great, that SARS is managing to do this and that there's perhaps more scope, but the bottom line is that our economy is not growing at a fast enough pace. We have a very narrow tax base, and we hear stories about some high net worth individuals leaving the country because they're not happy or whatever it is, which then means that they're not paying tax in the country. So given that fact, even if you can manage to get 100% of the non-compliant taxpayers, what then is the answer?
Well, I think that, as you say, that it all really comes down to getting the economy growing. We've had stagnant rates of growth. I think we're all aware of that. But I think that, we've got Eskom, we've got logistics issues. Even if we manage to solve all of those issues with Eskom and logistics, I still think that there's fundamental policy uncertainty and that there'd be a potential lack of willingness by investors to invest here given the uncertainties. I think that government really needs to embrace business a lot more and partnering with business. We do see public-private partnerships now coming to the fore. There needs to be more of that. But basically they've got to not only be tolerant of business, they've got to embrace working with business. That's the way. that we can get the economy going.
Yeah.
Business needs to have the confidence to invest in the economy.
Like you say, we are seeing those partnerships, you know, with the Business Leadership South Africa, Business for South Africa formations, working closely with government on energy, logistics and crime. But obviously, you know, you've got to cook the cake or bake the cake, right? It doesn't just happen overnight. So given future prospects, do you think we might be having a different conversation maybe in 2025, 2026, when we see the fruition of what comes out of these partnerships now?
Yes, I think that those partnerships that you're talking about have got a lot of potential for the country, but I do think that there need to be more of them, and there needs to be, I think, maybe more of a mind shift around possibly the ideology of maybe giving some control over to business in a number of areas where it's warranted. Not obviously warranted with some services, that need to be state-owned.
One of the things that we'll be looking out for is to hear whether the Finance Minister has a plan for the Social Relief of Distress Grant. He did indicate in the February budget that that was only budgeted for until the end of March 2024, and that only if resources became available could this thing be a sustainable path. One of the ways people have talked about, obviously, is raising the wealth tax of sorts, maybe raising VAT and so on and so forth. Do you think we're likely to hear anything about that at this stage?
I don't think at this stage, because I think, and especially given what we've seen from the Minister and in previous budgets, I think it's more likely that what we'll see is sort of wait and see how things go up to February before committing to that. I do think that it's likely that grant will be extended though come February, but I think it can't just be announced as a blanket thing now. I'd be surprised if it is announced at this stage. It will definitely be extended.
All right, David, thank you so much for your insights there. David Warneke, he's the head of tax technical at BDO South Africa, just giving us his insights there.